Am I on?
You're on.
We're going to do the lesson first, and then we'll do the meditation. I heard you folks are very flexible. I'm so glad to be back here. My first time here was your last day. There, yeah. So this is quite a beautiful place you've moved to. This is really just gorgeous. So I'm so glad to be here. Okay, seeing the whole elephant. What is that about? I want you to go back to elementary school. Do they still call it elementary school? Yeah. Okay. Remember the tale about the blind man and the elephant? That was big in the Hindu, the Sufi, the Buddhist tradition, and in elementary school. And it's about a group of blind men who touch an elephant to learn what it is. Each one feels a different part of the elephant, but only that part. Got it. I'm seeing heads nod. Great. At least that means they didn't just teach it up on Long Island in New York. So the first blind man touched the side of the elephant. The next one touched the tusk. Third one, the trunk. The fourth one knelt and put his arm around the leg. The fifth one stroked what was the ear. And the last one, the sixth one, touched the tail. So they all got together and talked afterwards over guru coffee. And they compared notes, and they were in complete disagreement. First one who touched the side of the elephant said, the elephant is like a wall. Second one said, no, brother, the elephant is a spear, the one who touched the tusk. The third one who touched the trunk said, you're both idiots. He was less spiritual. You're both idiots. The elephant is like a snake. The fourth one said, what we know as the leg, he said, the truth is the elephant is a tree. The fifth one, the ear, said, I'm not sure what you're talking about, but it's a fan. And the last one who touched the tail said, believe what you will, the truth is the elephant is a rope. Okay? Depending on what they had touched, where they stood, each concludes what the elephant was like. They all had the truth, determined by their limited points of view. But no one saw the whole elephant. Each blind man creates his own version of reality. The elephant is a spear. The elephant is a rope. The elephant is a fan. Our unique way of seeing life, for us, determined by our experiences we've had, where we're standing, the lens with which we're seeing things, all of that creates what we see, what we believe. Now, while our individual experiences are true, it's not always the totality of truth, because perception doesn't equal truth. But it still becomes the story that we live by. Our sensory perceptions, our life experiences can mean very, very limited access, can mean incomplete information, and certainly misinterpretations. All of that paved the way for how I think, how I behave, how I live my life. So, how can I, a person with a limited taste of truth, turn that into the one and only version of reality? Buddha gives advice about how to form a more complete, a more accurate view of reality. We should not mistake the part for the whole. Don't mistake the tusk for the elephant or a person for a whole group. So we have choice and power about how we see and interpret what's out there and then what we do with that information. Unity principle number 3. We create our life experiences through our way of thinking. Sound familiar? Those thoughts create our feelings. Those feelings create our action. I just read a book by someone I'd never heard of. She was a Unity writer in the 1920s, Imelda Octavia Shanklin? Had anybody ever heard of her? Wow, okay. So I just found this book a few weeks ago. And 1929, it's called What Are You? And she says, your thoughts are the tools with which you carve your life story. And I thought, what if our life stories have been based on the part, not the whole? Well, then we've lived having mistaken the tusk for the elephant. We've made decisions, taken actions, and carved out a life based on limited information. It can be difficult to live in harmony with people who've also tasted the truth, but a different one. One which is also based on incomplete information. Shanklin says the senses are accurate within their own ranges, but their ranges are so circumscribed that you cannot, from the senses alone, gain any appreciable knowledge of reality. Now, some people have a particular perception of God, limit God to that perception, and that becomes the truth. I was writing this, and I thought, limit God? What an oxymoron. I think that's the word. And I thought, in a very righteous moment, which I have, oh, so many people do that. You know, that's one reason why there are so many problems in the world. And God, I've been doing that too. There was a difficult time I was going through. And as I wrote that, I thought, oh my God, I limited God every time I focused on my problem and not on God. Emmett Fox, The Golden Key. I limit God by thinking this is a big problem rather than I got a big God. Joel Goldsmith tells us the presence within us is greater than all the problems that are in the world. Now, I'm still learning to relax into that presence. And at times, I still give power to my limited perceptions. I don't mean to shock you on a Sunday morning, but the Course in Miracles reminds us that perception is a mirror, not a fact. What I look on is my state of mind reflected outward. Change your thoughts, change your state of mind, different energy will follow. In his book, Loving Without Conditions, Farini says, when our experiences are not met, when our expectations are not met, we are receiving a correction and are being told that we do not see the whole truth of a situation. We are being asked to expand our perception. I love that. Now, we are not being asked to judge or diminish ourselves, by the way. We are not being asked to feel shame. We do that. Sometimes others help us do that. We're just receiving a correction, and by being asked to expand our perceptions. Help me see this as you would see it. Our perceptions about God, our thoughts, our circumstances. You know, we believe we have free will and free choice, and certainly that ties into our thinking. At the same time, sometimes people blame God for what they have, what they don't have, for their circumstances. I read this sweet little story in a Unity magazine a few months ago. Little girl, dressed for Sunday school. She was late. She was running, and she was praying, and she said, "Please, God, don't let me late. Please don't let me be late." And she trips, and she falls. She skins herself, and she tears the dress a little bit. And she gets up, she brushes it off, and she starts running again. And she goes, "Please, please don't let me late. Don't let me be late. But please don't shove me and knock me down either." Easier to blame than to claim. To claim responsibility for our actions, thoughts, for falling, for not getting up. Responsibility for saying words or taking actions, perhaps based on limited information. Easier to blame than to claim. Claim responsibility for seeing the world as just a spear or a wall or a rope, and then treating others and ourselves based on that limited truth. We create our life experiences through our way of thinking. When we can no longer change our circumstances, we're challenged to change ourselves. Our perceptions, that changes everything. In fact, that shift in consciousness is the miracle in A Course in Miracles. It took me a while to learn it. Now, there are some people in their thinking that actually see crisis as opportunity. Yes, there are some. What is the blessing in what I am going through? Let me say that is not me. I too often become my pain, I wrap it around me, I cling to it. That does not serve me. So let me tell you, in doing this talk, one of the reasons I was so delighted to be asked to come back is this is like spiritual therapy for me. Because in writing it, in saying it to you, in living with it for the month, I tend to focus on what I need at that moment. And what I needed has been being able to say, help me see this as you see it. So thank you. We'll see what issue I've got when I come back in 2 months. 2 more months. Help me see it as you see it. Because too often in my life, this is how I see it. Can people see it? It's couldn't find a bigger one. Little straw. That's the perspective I've got. I'm often like the blind man. When I obsess, this is my world. When I worry, this is my perspective. I live the limited story when I'm seeing with my human eyes. And at times I make decisions, treat or define others based on this very limited perspective. And at times I'm really wed to my story and I live this false truth, which is based on limited information and causes me to suffer needlessly. What about you? At what times do you view your life, your circumstances in this way, a very narrow way? How much control over your life, over your happiness, are you giving this very limited perspective? We need to expand our views. You know, and I tried to find a hula hoop to bring in as a prop too. Couldn't find it, but I thought I could do this, where I'd look out and this is what I would see. Or this is what I would see. Remember Buddha's words. We should not mistake the part for the whole. Not mistake the tusk for the elephant and then live with that as being truth. Help me see it as you would see it. Course in Miracles tells us to view it from above, to be lifted up from a higher place, look down upon it, for from there your perspective will be quite different. That in the midst of it, it does seem real. So that perspective is what Course in Miracles says is above the battleground. Eckhart Tolle calls it from the balcony. Can help alter our way of thinking. My first minister, when I came to Unity in 1990, was this little feisty old lady, Amalia Frank. Of course, when I say old, she's younger than I am now, but I was a pup, okay? And I remember going to see her and talk to her about some issues, and she said, Roy, I can't wait to see what good comes of this. I was like, okay, all right. Even now with what's going on in this country and the world, I bet, and she's since passed, I bet she would say, I can't wait to see what good comes of this. I'm not saying that, but you know what I realized that I wanted to share that felt so important in doing this is, that came to mind as I wrote this. So, the option of that, thinking like that, isn't here, even if I don't live that way. It's a part of my retraining. I'd suggest it might be the same for you. I know a lot of us come to Unity for retraining of our thinking. You might not be able to live what you hear in this room, even if you believe it. But if you can recall it, if it's present, if it's here, that feels really important to me. I mean, what that feels like for me, you decide for you, is that the fact that it comes to mind means I'm on the path. Because we're talking about spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Okay? And so just coming to mind, I think, is an important thing. Do you do burning bowl and letters to God? So you know what that is? Letting go, then expanding our consciousness. I release so I can become greater. But how often do we release our limited perceptions, release stuff that we know, which dictate our false life stories? I release that I know so I can become greater by being reminded that there is so much I do not know. I am open and receptive to what I do not know. I do not always know. I don't always know what's best for me. Now, sometimes I become so busy staring at my problem, I don't see the guidance that's there. That makes sense if I'm doing it like that. Of course, there are times I do ask for guidance. So I think I'm releasing, I know. But there are times when it's not the answer I want. Oh, thanks, higher power, but that's not it. Thank you so much. I was thinking about this one. Why don't you sit this one out, you know? Trouble letting go, trouble detaching from some of my preferences. Do you know what I mean? You know, I really think I'm being spiritual and open. Dan Millman, in Way of the Peaceful Warrior, has this wonderful story about Sam, who lunchtime at work, he opens his lunchbox and says, son of a gun, peanut butter and jelly again. I hate peanut butter and jelly. And he does this every day. Oh, God, I hate peanut butter and jelly. Well, the colleagues got really tired of it. And they said, why don't you tell your wife to make you something different? And he says, what do you mean tell my wife? I'm not married. I make my own sandwiches. We all make our own sandwiches. Our quality of life, our sanity is determined daily by the ingredients we choose to put in between morning and night. We get to choose our thoughts. We can base them on a vaster vision than a straw offers. I don't like today's sandwich. Well, I made it. I'm responsible. I'm responsible even in troubling circumstances. When we can no longer change our circumstances, we're challenged to change ourselves. One may have a past filled with pain and trauma. That doesn't have to define her. Or a present filled with a disabling condition or illness. That doesn't have to define him. In the 1980s, I started working in the HIV field. I was certainly at a time when people were dying. When I'd give a positive result, it very often meant they would be dead perhaps soon. And so I counseled a lot of those folks, and so often they needed to learn to define themselves as someone other than someone with HIV, as other than being what they called damaged goods. Some of my clients would say, when talking about their status, they would say, I'm HIV. They wouldn't say, I have HIV, some did, or I'm HIV positive. I'm HIV. Total identification with that. Myrtle Fillmore says we need to work with ourselves to release those false truths that we hold. Emmett Fox reminds us that we've accustomed ourselves to our habits of thinking and acting, and that we've chosen thoughts upon which we allow our minds to dwell. So I ask you, what are we to do? Dwell elsewhere. We are responsible for what we think. What we do comes from what we think, which means we better be real sure when we think we know. Do you remember Auntie Mame? There was a movie with Roz Russell, and Mame was the musical. There's a famous quote from there is, "Life is a banquet and most poor suckers are starving to death." Well, in doing research for this, I found Emmett Fox said it first. Listen to this. He said, "We live in a cafeteria-style world. All this richness and peace is available. We have to claim these things for ourselves." Life is a banquet. Think of that cafeteria line. There's joy pudding. Oh, there's some compassion compote, Pam. How about some loving lasagna? No, I think I'll have that sadness soup. I'll have a bowl of that. Or the pain porridge looks okay. And just a little bit of that souffle of suffering. Or choosing peanut butter and jelly every day. Unthinkable. But so often, that's what I've done when all this richness and peace is available. We all make our own sandwiches. We fill our plates with thoughts which carve out our life stories. So, at times of greatest need, what is being provided in this smorgasbord that you are not seeing or choosing? Course in Miracles asks, how many opportunities have you had to gladden yourself, and how many have you refused? Meister Eckhart, many centuries ago, reminds us to be always ready for the gifts of God, for God is 1,000 times more ready to give than we are to receive. So we need to affirm, I am open and receptive to your gifts, and I am ready to receive. Back to the blind men. Different stories, each different perceptions, what a elephant is, how it's to be used, what's to be done with it, if it's friend or foe. None of them completely true. Some of the stories dangerous. Because the elephant is not a wall, a spear, a piece of rope. We live with limited truth and we turn that into the one and only version of reality for ourselves and others. And that lens, I'm so neurotic, I brought so many straws to make sure I got more in the car. And now this is hanging up on my bathroom mirror, actually, as a reminder. This lens is a lens through which we think our thoughts, speak our words, take action, and live our lives. And we make selections from that cafeteria line based on the truth we know. So when you're standing on that spiritual cafeteria line, take it all in. Take it all in, ask higher power to help you see it as the higher power sees it, and make choices. Concerned about your diet, your cholesterol, tummy? Fox reminds us, your mental diet is really the most important thing in your life. So friends, don't mistake the part for the whole. For as someone said, we hardly know anything at all in comparison with what there is to know. So let your thoughts you have written on the world, let go of those thoughts. Let go of some of the stories you live by. Broaden your vision. Choose from a place of oneness, of connection. Receive from the abundance of all that God has to offer. And then chow down on God's gifts. And then go back to the world and live the truth of what an elephant really is. And lift us all up. Blessings.
Thank you.
And now, we will go into meditation, special time together. A time of going within. A time of letting the noise and the clamor of the world recede. I invite you to sit comfortably, feet on the floor. Perhaps you'll want to remove things from your lap and let the chair and floor support you. and feel what it's like to be supported. And breathe. Breathe on purpose. Notice what that is like. Note your thoughts as they flow through your mind. Don't attach, don't hold on to any of them. Just observe as if they were clouds passing by. We create our life experiences through our way of thinking, our thoughts or prayers, for they are the tools with which we carve our life stories. Observe these stories that you tell yourself. Notice as they come and go, as they flow by. Notice one that seems to return, perhaps bothersome in some way to you. One that you seem to have trouble letting go of. It's time to expand your perceptions about this thought. To see it through a different lens, to be lifted up and from a higher place to look down upon it. Dear God, help me see this as you would see it. Help me see this as you would see it, because I cannot, from my senses alone, gain any appreciable knowledge of reality. And so for a few moments we sit in silence, expanding our perspective and ready to receive. From a higher perspective. And with this consciousness, that new perspective, take a deep breath in. Then ever so gently, breathe yourself back to the room, affirming silently, I am open and receptive to your gifts and to a new perspective. And so it is.